Hey guys, back for another mission tutorial. Today, why don't we go ahead and talk about, let's see if I can find a mobile defense mission. Now, mobile defense missions are very much the same as a normal defense mission, just with a slight few twists. The normal defense mission, of course, you have one thing, you're trying to protect it through waves and waves and waves of guys and last as long as you can. Whereas the mobile defense mission gives you a set number that you're aiming for. So in this case, upper left UI says data terminals 2. So we get this little data slab that we have to take and insert into a panel. And when it's inserted into that panel, the actual defense part of the mission begins. And UI will update to tell you what time you have to hold out for, so to speak. It's nothing really too crazy. It can change a little bit depending on where the stage is taking place. Grenier faction mobile defenses in particular have one stage where there's actually 3 things you have to defend, with the third popping up after you get the first and second done. So that's something to keep in mind a little bit for those. Excuse me. So you get yourself this thing. When you're holding a data slab, you can only use either a melee weapon or your sidearm. So that's something that's going to be needed to keep in mind. And this might actually end up being the 3-piece one, which is terrible. Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of the 3-piece one. It's just such an extra level of work. Now, since this is a mobile defense, the enemies will keep spawning, so you don't have to worry about running out of enemies and having nothing to do. So, as you can see, jack into a terminal. We now have to defend this terminal for however long it says, in this case, a minute 30, give or take. Bad guys will continue to spawn in and come in and try to take our thing, blow it up, destroy it. You can see the terminal health right up above, so you kind of know how it's doing, just like it would be a defense. As soon as you jack into the terminal, it pretty much is how it works. You have, I say that, but then again, it's a little bit different. I mean, you do have the object that you need to protect, but at the same time, instead of holding out for a set number of dudes and proceeding to the next wave, the wave is a static amount of time. So 51 seconds, and then this terminal has been hacked or taken or whatever you wish to refer to it as, and we will move on to the next one. So it's almost like a defense light in a way, because you're defending an object and you're defending multiple objects throughout the stage. Although not at a time, it's more of a consecutive thing. But you do still have that object that you're trying to keep alive on top of yourself. Of course, the higher levels you go to, the harder it's going to be to keep your little defensive objects safe. I also believe that with more people, it will actually spawn more enemies. But of course, the fact that you have more people also means it's going to be a little bit easier to, deal with all of the enemies. So it's kind of a, give and take. Slice. So we get the one terminal done. Now we have to go over to the other terminal. And this part is the same for all mobile defenses. I mean, you have 2 objectives normally that you got to go to. You get one done, you go to the next one, you pop it in, you stay for X amount of time. How long you have to stay around them fluctuates between different stages. Some have you staying a lot longer than others. And this also extends into the void. So, I mean, it's the same format pretty much every time you do a mobile defense. Even with alert mission mobile defenses, you still have this format where you go, you find a terminal, you put it in for X amount of time, and then you guard it from then. Now, as I said before, the Grenier level, this one in particular, likes to add in a third object, which you can just hear Lotus talking about there, if you actually could hear it over my big mouth. Talking about how there's an Orokin artifact in here and you gotta protect it from the Grenier. So, although we have Data Terminal 0, you'll see that our objective on the minimap is updated out here. At which point things get a little bit more difficult than they just were, because now instead of having really only like a half of a direction the enemies can come from, they have the entirety around this little platform that's going to come out, making it to be a little bit more difficult. So it makes for a little bit of a challenge, because of course now you have all these different directions the enemies are capable of shooting the thing from, and your goal of keeping it alive is a little bit more difficult because of that. Granted, we're, you know, a well-developed Warframe for this kind of mission, so it shouldn't be an issue. On that topic, mobile defenses. What are good units to use? What Warframe's really just cream of the crop when it comes to defending objectives on the move? Well, as you can see here, Vauban is a nice unit to use because he does have a lot of crowd control moves. They might not necessarily do a whole lot of damage, but when it comes to a mobile defense mission, since you're holding out for a set amount of time, it's almost a little bit less about the damage you do and more about just keeping everything that you're supposed to keep safe. Alternatively, you can keep it safe by just dealing out a butt ton of damage and making everything dead, because if everything's dead, then obviously it's not going to be attacking your objective. But as far as defenses go, the mobile defense benefits from the same kind of frames that a normal defense would benefit from. You can get a frost and have a snow globe protecting the objective so it's not taking damage. And if it's not taking damage, then it's going to be hard to lose because, well, nothing is going to kill it. You also have the option of something like a Limbo, who can cast his rift moves and banish the entire objective into the rift so enemies can't hurt it that way. Unless, of course, you know, they get within range of his rift and enter it so that they're also in the rift world, just based on how that move works. Oh, sorry. You can use frames like Banshee and her ultimate to kind of cause people that get near the objective to fall down. Of course, you know, if they're far away and they're shooting, they can still hit it if they're outside of her move. So when it really comes to the defense, I mean, you have Vauban, who has that limited capacity. Again, if enemies are outside of his move, it's not going to help. Whereas with Frost and Limbo, if they're outside of his move, that's where you want them to be, because then they're not going to be able to do anything to the objective. Anybody that has a kind of crowd control utility style move, like Excalibur's Blind, can come in handy, because if they can't see or they are stunned or whatever, then they're not going to be attacking the objective. Or, like I said, you could decide that you're going to go on the all-out attack and just get something like Ash or Ember and just murder everybody down before they can do anything to really hurt that objective. Trinity can keep everybody nice and healed in the group, although I believe her move no longer actually works on objectives, so she won't be healing the objective. Oberon can be handy in the sense that he can heal the group, but he also has a kind of a wide area ultimate move that'll hit a bunch of dudes, and when it's hitting them, even if it doesn't do enough damage to kill them, it is stopping them from attacking during the time it's in effect. And if they're not attacking, again, they're not destroying the thing you're trying to protect. So he also has a kind of carpet-based move that will cause damage to anything in a nice little area around his carpet, which is kind of a iffy thing, because it works great at lower levels when you're doing lots of damage with it, but of course the higher the enemies go, the less they're going to care about the damage you're dealing, and the less effective it's going to be. Whereas you'd be better off using something like his ultimate, which is going to be causing people to fall over and have to get back up, and actually stopping them from attack. Rhino's Stomp can cause people to be stunned, which is handy, although its range isn't always the best in comparison to other moves. Banshee can cause people to get knocked down. I mean, there's a lot of frames that can be useful to a defense mission. It's really just a matter of what you have, and it's very similar to a normal defense mission as far as the units that are great, because you're still defending an object. You still got to keep this one stationary thing safe at a time. So Frost or Frost Prime with his bubble works great, and that'll work great against pretty much anything. If you're doing a infested mobile defense, which I don't think I've even done. That might be different now because they gave an entire planet back to the infested. But of course, same thing as defense missions. If you're fighting the infested, then he might not be as great because the enemies are going to want to get inside of there, and it'll stop you from shooting in there. In a case like that, something like Ember might be nicer because she has the Ring of Fire. Banshee's ultimate causes a lot of knockdown, so that can be handy with a wide enough area to kind of keep control over the enemies, because if they're knocked over, they're not shooting. Excalibur can blind people, that can come in handy. He also has his relatively decent sized ultimate attack that hits everybody. Limbo, again, he can cause his Rift Orb to kind of protect the objective from anything that's not in the Rift. Of course, the downside of that is not as prevalent in a mobile defense as it is in a normal defense, because although you still can't shoot out, some of the bad guys are still going to run into it, allowing you to kill them. And as long as the objective isn't getting hit, you're doing the right thing. And since you're holding out for a set time as opposed to a normal defense mission's waves, it's not as important that you're picking up everything that's dropping on the ground. A Hydroid can turn into a puddle and kind of stop any melee enemies from attacking the objective, but it doesn't do much for anything shooting at the objective. He also has some, his ultimate move pops up a bunch of tentacles to slap people around, so that's kind of a nice area dealing with move. Your Lokis and your Loki Primes can radial disarm, which causes everybody with guns to no longer be able to use their guns, which means everybody that's hit by it turns into a melee enemy. So in conjunction with some other frames, that can be super handy. Likewise, he also has a decoy move, which will distract enemies as they shoot at the decoy instead of the objective or you. So that can be handy. Mag Prime and normal Mag have Crush and Pull, which are kind of area moves. And in the case of Pull, it knocks them over. In the case of Crush, the entire time it's casting, they're not attacking. So that's a little bit of a nice spread. Mesa, her shooting gallery can cause people's weapons to jam if you're close enough, but the range that most enemies will probably be attacking the cryopod, it might not reach. She can still work fine though, especially if you're more of a mobile person. Mirage, really good at protecting herself, and she can do some good damage, but as far as causing the objective to be safe. There isn't a whole lot to offer there. So if you're going for that kill 'em all approach, she'd work nice. But if you're trying to be the one that sits back and protects the objective, not so much. Necros, kind of a little bit of the same thing. I mean, he can terrify things and get close to it, but anything outside of the range of terrify isn't going to be affected. So you still might suffer the people shooting at the objective, although it'll be great for dealing with anybody trying to melee the objective. And his ultimate does kind of summon dead enemies to help you, so you can kind of get, for a period of time, some helpers to help take some of the slack off of the objective. Nova has the Molecular Prime ultimate, which causes enemies in its range to slow down and become highly explosive. So she kind of does a double duty of being a defensive frame in that sense, because if they're shooting at everything slower, they're not going to do as much damage, while also being offensive about it, because if you kill them, you can chain detonations across the entire room and wipe out large numbers of dudes. And if everybody's dead, then you don't have much to worry about attacking your defense objective, do you? Nyx, same reason she would be good in defense, she would be good in a mobile defense. Because she has that chaos move that confuses enemies, it can take some of the heat off of your defense objective as the enemies battle with themselves. She can also use her absorb ultimate to kind of try to draw the attention of the enemies so that they're attacking her instead of the pod, and then releasing it to cause like a big area effect explosion that kills things and knocks things down that are close enough. Oberon, again, he has a move that pretty much makes a dangerous carpet on the ground, which works wonderful at low levels when you're doing all kinds of high damage and the bad guys can't take it. It doesn't scale very well with enemies because they can start sucking up damage like nobody's business. But his ultimate also causes people to lift up and slam down and then have to pick themselves up off the ground. And the entire time that's happening, they're not attacking. So you're effectively kind of controlling the amount of fire coming in. Rhino is great for not having himself die due to Iron Skin, but outside of you running around trying to kill everybody, the only move he has that really contributes well to a mobile defense is Stomp, and it doesn't have the largest range unless you do some modding on it. But Stomp itself does work great as far as kind of controlling enemies, because it kind of makes them hover in space and they're frozen in time for a little bit until the move wears off, which means they're not attacking anything. But the range isn't going to really, unless you run out and find those guys, stop anybody from shooting at anything. Trinity can keep the group alive, but her moves no longer really keep the objective alive, which is a shame. Volt can cause the shields. You can put shields around the objective, making it rather hard for the enemies to actually get in there. It's going to be a bit more high maintenance than, say, Frost Snow Globe, because it's not a 360 degree move. So that is something you'll have to worry about. Zypher can create a bunch of tornadoes that can cause havoc all over the place as they suck up and throw bad guys around. And also has a shield that she can make on herself, a kind of turbulent shield, which will redirect shots. I'm not positive. I'm not very good with Zephyr, so I'm not going to, tell you any hardcore facts about her or anything, but assuming that that turbulence move extends far enough, she could park herself right around the objective and it may redirect shots and stop the objective from getting hit. How effective that would be, especially in comparison to other things, is kind of more what I'm suspicious of. But it could probably be done, you know what I mean? Vauban, again, he's got the black hole that sucks everybody into it within range, causing them to just kind of spiral around and get crushed, which means they're not doing nothing while they're stuck in it. He also has this Bastille move, which kind of freezes everybody up to whatever the hard limit is that enters it, which means they're not attacking, and if they're not attacking, your objective is safe. Anybody can really be used, it's just some frames will be easier, and it's like that for every mission. Any mission can be tackled by any frame, it's just easier with some frames than others. So, you're not going to be missing out necessarily if you're playing Excalibur on any of these missions. You can use Excalibur on all the missions. It might not be as easy a time to use Excalibur as it is somebody like Vauban who can prevent all these enemies from doing stuff towards your objective, but you can do it. And likewise, if you're having any trouble with defense missions, particularly mobile defense missions, remember that the game is actually pitched as a cooperative experience. So all you have to do if you're having trouble is remember to go up there, make sure your matchmaking is set to public. And chances are you'll be able to find a group to play with. If not, if you have friends on, see if maybe they can help you. You can go to the recruiting channel or even the general chat and see if maybe anybody wants to run that mission with you. Because as a group, it's a lot easier to do things. I mean, unless you have one of those, like, you know, rogue, annoying groups that are just there to cause trouble for everybody. But that's pretty rare in my experience with this game. So that would be mobile defense missions. If you have any questions or anything you would like to add yourself, feel free to comment below. I'll try to respond or answer or address it when I get the chance. In the meantime, keep all those cryopods safe.